Okay, so moving on to motion re-proposed approval by Dáil Éireann of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund regulations of 2024. So we'll call the Minister of State, Martin Heydon, to move the motion.
I move.
And Minister, you have 10 minutes.
I move that Dáil Éireann approves the following regulation in draft Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund Regulations 2024, copies of which are laid in draft form before Dáil Éireann on the 3rd of October 2024. The horse and greyhound sectors are embedded in the social and economic fabric of our country, and that of rural Ireland in particular. Successive governments have acknowledged the significance of both industries, and they have supported through legislation and policy initiatives and through the provision of funding. This support has helped maintain Ireland's world-class reputation for excellence in horse racing, greyhound racing and breeding. Both sectors make a valuable contribution to a balanced regional economy. The most recent analysis conducted by Deloitte estimated that the thoroughbred racing industry has an annual economic impact of €2.46 billion, with direct and indirect employment of 30,000 people. The Power report estimated that greyhound racing supports over 4,000 full and part-time jobs, with a further 6,000 people deriving an economic benefit from the industry. The Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund has played a key role in providing investment to the sectors and has been instrumental in shaping of the industries and the many livelihoods they support. The horse and greyhound racing industries receive financial support from the state through the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund under Section 12 of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Act 2001. Payments are made from the fund to the Horse Racing Ireland, HRI, and Rásig Conhéireann, RCE. Exchequer support provided from the fund is crucial to the continued development of the horse and greyhound racing industries. Since 2001, a total of €1.7 billion has been paid from the fund to the horse and greyhound racing industries in accordance with the provisions of the Act. The cumulative upper limit on payments from the fund provided for under relevant regulations has been reached. To give effect to the provisions of the Budget 2025, this cumulative upper limit must be increased by regulation. The estimates for my department, passed by both houses as part of Budget 2025, include an allocation of €99.1 million for the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund, and this will be distributed in accordance with Section 12(6) of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Act 2001, with 80% or €79.3 million going to HRI and 20% equating to €19.8 million to Rásig Conhéireann. In order to allow my department to provide the monies allocated in Budget 2025, it is necessary to comply with the technical requirement under Section 12(13) of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Act to increase the cumulative limit of the amount payable from the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund by €99.1 million to some €1.8 billion. This is achieved by way of the regulation submitted to the House today. The aggregate limit of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund has been increased in this manner in 2004 and in 2009 to 2023 inclusive. I will now focus a little bit on each industry, starting with the horse racing sector. Horse racing has a significant impact on Ireland's rural economy and creates a favourable international profile for our country. According to the 2023 Deloitte report on the social and economic impact of the Irish thoroughbred breeding and racing, which I referenced earlier, it is estimated that the Irish thoroughbred industry has an economic annual impact of €2.46 billion. This represents a 34% increase in value from 2016. The sector also supports direct and indirect jobs of some 30,000 people, the majority of whom live in rural communities. The sector has an incredible reputation as a location for breeding and racing, as evidenced by Ireland's position as the second largest producer of bloodstock in the world by value sold, after the USA. Ireland also has the world's third highest number of thoroughbred foals each year after the USA and Australia. The thoroughbred sector is part of our identity, and government support has reflected that over many years. Naturally, underlying all the facts and figures are the countless individuals who work directly and indirectly have shaped the current state of Irish racing and breeding industry. In 2023, Irish trained horses racing in Britain won close to 17 million sterling, well ahead of the 2022 figure, and likewise Irish trained horses won over €10 million in prize money throughout the rest of the world. The figures relating to the bloodstock and breeding sector also showed significant increases, a huge sign of confidence in the industry. There were rises of 7.5% in bloodstock sales at public auction in Ireland and 13.8% in the worldwide value of Irish foaled horses sold through auction, with a combined figure reaching in excess of €565 million. As proven in 2023, Irish owners, trainers and jockeys and horses continue to set and uphold a high standard, and their exceptional achievements and endurance influence underscore Ireland's international prominence. Even though other noteworthy racing nations have significant advantages, including those of scale, demography and economy, the Irish equine breeding and racing industry is extremely competitive globally, clearly an example of a sector punching well above its weight. We are able to continuously compete with and outperform our competitors because of the extraordinary passion and dedication to excellence shown by all those involved in the industry, including yard workers, jockeys and owners. The welfare of both people and animals is a key priority for the sector. This is evidenced in HRI's current strategic plan, and my department will continue to support both HRI and IHRB, the Irish Horse Racing Regulatory Board, in this regard. An independent review of the IHRB's anti-doping programme, carried out by the international equine anti-doping expert Dr. Craig Suan, concluded that the programme at least matches international best practice in most respects. It also found that IHRB had made significant advances in recent years. That said, we must leave no stone unturned in continuing to improve animal welfare, equine welfare as well. I would now like to turn to the greyhound racing sector. Through the evaluation of the greyhound racing industry in the 2021 Power Report, it was highlighted that the greyhound industry provides and supports considerable employment across the Irish economy. It is estimated that in 2019, the industry, both directly and indirectly, supported over 4,000 full-time and part-time jobs in the economy. Moreover, there are in excess of 6,000 active greyhound owners who perceive this lifestyle as a fundamental aspect of their lives. The greyhound racing industry is an integral part of the social fabric of our country. The finance provided to the greyhound racing industry supports economic activity nationwide and helps maintain a long-standing tradition. It is widely acknowledged that funding for this sector is especially important for rural Ireland. The future of the industry is dependent on a strong governance platform and on the industry having the highest standards of integrity and welfare, founded on a robust regulatory system. There is a strong commitment to improve animal welfare in this sector in the programme for government, and this government support is contingent on a guarantee of welfare standards being upheld by RCE on an annual basis. This is reflected in the annual parameters set out by officials in my department and in the regular engagements in RCE. RCE continue to operate an ever-expanding greyhound care fund, utilising income from the Horse and Greyhound Fund towards the implementation of the highest possible welfare standards at kennels and racing facilities throughout the country. Provisions in the Greyhound Racing Act 2019 support Rescue Conhairn in strengthening greyhound welfare. This legislation strengthens the legal basis for the industry with a view to fortifying the integrity of the greyhound racing sector and improving provision for greyhound traceability. Through this Act, governance in RCE is improved. There are enhancements to industry regulatory oversight, updates to sanctions and enhanced integrity standards. It facilitates the board in focusing on its priority objective of achieving the highest standards of care and welfare for greyhounds. Further commencement orders for the small number of remaining sections will continue to be phased in as expediently as possible, and as implementation continues, this will enable RCE to ensure the important heritage associated with greyhound racing in Ireland can continue under the appropriate rules and regulations. A key element of the new legislation is the provision, for the first time, for a full IT traceability system for racing greyhounds. The Rescue Conhairn Traceability System, RCETS, came into operation on the 11th of January 2021. The system provides a mechanism to ensure that racing greyhounds are properly registered and traceable throughout their lives up to the point of rehoming or retirement. These life stages include birth registration, racing, and all changes of ownership and location and end of life. Data from the system at the end of August 2024 indicate that 50,148 greyhounds were subject to traceability. Ongoing work is being carried out on the system. RCETS Phase 2 is currently in development, and this will include additional functionality to facilitate the recording of injuries at RCE licensed stadia during racing, official and unofficial trials, the capture of details relating to euthanasia of a greyhound by a veterinary surgeon, the capture of medical records and health checks checked out by veterinary surgeons, the recording of sampling history and adverse analytical findings, and report details of offences under the Greyhound Racing Act 2019. The continued expansion of the system has coincided with the development and further improvement of a range of other welfare and care programmes that reflect RCE's commitment to ensuring greyhound welfare across the state receives the highest level of protection. In addition to its care and welfare programme, RCE is involved in areas which include regulatory integrity and laboratory functions. This includes activity on welfare and inspections, investigations, testing regimes, veterinary services and financial support for the Irish Retired Greyhound Trust and contributions to private rehoming agencies. RCE is fully committed to development, management and promotion of a successful commercial greyhound racing industry that is built on a consumer-focused, high-quality entertainment product which meets the highest possible international regulatory and welfare standards, which will continue to be governed by my department. In conclusion, Cathaoirleach, these two industries are fundamental to balance economic, regional development and growth and provide widespread benefits for many rural communities. A key priority for government is the social and economic needs of rural communities, and in this context, these industries continue to contribute to rural economic activity and employment and should be recognised for their work in these areas. The welfare of horses and greyhounds is a cornerstone of both industries, and I am assured that HRI and RCE are striving to ensure the highest standards for the sports and their participants on and away from the racetrack. This includes the provision of financial and other supports to many organisations to ensure health and welfare of horse and greyhounds. The Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund has played a key role in providing this investment and is instrumental in shaping these industries and the many livelihoods they support. A rapidly changing international environment continues to pose challenges to the Irish economy, with social, demographic and technological challenges facing both industries, and it can be somewhat difficult to fully predict what the future holds. It is therefore crucial, Cathaoirleach, that we support these important industries and continue navigation through these challenges in 2024 and onwards into 2025.
Thank you, Minister. Okay, moving on to Deputy Browne for Sinn Féin.
We welcome the Labour Party amendment and we won't oppose it, as it's very similar to the one brought by Deputy Clare Curran and Deputy Johnny Mythen last year. The same review was sought by Sinn Féin last year and the Minister committed to do so, and he'd also committed several times at committee level, but no results have been forthcoming in relation to it. There's little room for doubt as to how horse and greyhound racing is of benefit to many rural communities across the country. As a proud Tipperary man, there's no doubt at all as to its benefits in County Tipperary. Having said that, we have a responsibility to ensure that this significant sum of money, which is increasing each year, is allocated properly by the HRI and the RCE. In relation to this, I want to speak on the issue of the review of where the funding goes within the sector, how we can be sure that smaller operators in the sector are not crowded out by funding by prize funds, and then of course there's the issue of animal welfare. On the first issue, the Minister told the Agriculture Committee that a consultancy report has been awaited from Mazars with regard to the IHRB aspect of the funding, which would then inform a wider review. That review still has not started. Does the Minister not think that the public genuinely deserves a level of oversight of the industry that provides a level of transparency that is immediately recognisable? So I would ask the Minister if he has a timeline of when the Mazars report is due, and if he has a timeline in mind to initiate the review upon receipt of that report. And that brings me on to where the funding goes, because continually there are questions about whether prize money, which often goes to the big business owners, is disproportionately being drawn away from the smaller operators. We need clarity and transparency here, and that is further crucial aspect of any review. And of course, animal welfare. Before I begin, I want to recognise those in horse racing and greyhound racing sectors who are committed to the welfare of their animals. The vile actions of a few must not tarnish the efforts of the many. Yet we must face up to the need to commit more substantially to welfare and to take a no-tolerance approach to the horrendous instances of abuse that arise, because we have to give as much time and effort to prevention as we do to cure. And the recent reports we have seen regarding the mistreatment of horses reinforce that. The Minister recently told the Agriculture Committee that the RCE has told him that it is exceeding the 10% limit on welfare. It appears as though that is enough for the Minister not to increase it. Is that how this has been decided upon? Because if it is, then we need that review more than ever, as it seems like a rule of thumb approach, which is similar to the infamous 2080 split, which has never been explained fully. And finally, on the issue of animal welfare, I've been contacted by Paws Animal Rescue in Mullinahone, County Tipperary. There are remedial works that they are intent on carrying out, but there's no funding given to them for this. The Animal Welfare Grant Programme is not for capital or infrastructural purposes. So if approved, which I implore you to do, they would use that grant to pay off the VIT bill they have of 50,000, which is likely to increase to nearly 60,000 by the time the grant issues. While this will give them some leeway in directing whatever meagre resource they have towards the structural improvements, the fact remains that no funding is given to these organisations for structural work. There needs to be funding made available for improvements of this nature. later. And let me remind you again of how these organisations are often the ones shoulder the burden of the REC Mythen. I would request the Department bears this in mind when considering not just the fund we are speaking of today, but in recognising the adequately supporting independent animal welfare organisations who rely on fundraising for their funding. So in addition to this, I would also appeal to the Department to work positively with PAWS and to live up to the remarks the Minister frequently asserts about the importance of animal welfare in this chamber and in the Agriculture Committee. Because if we are ever to address animal welfare significantly, I am not confining it to the horse and greyhound industry, but generally, then the Department needs to be realistic, stop sticking its head in the sand and address the need that is there, rather than keeping these vital services unsure of the avoidable obstacles they may face year on year.
I would like to thank the Minister for his statement. We would like to acknowledge from the start the importance of the horse industry and the greyhound industry and their annual economic impact on the economy. The thoroughbred sector generates approximately $2.6 billion directly and indirectly, supporting over 30,000 jobs, with the greyhound racing industry supporting over 4,000 jobs, almost all in rural Ireland. One of the issues I would like to raise with the Minister is animal welfare. Obviously, there are always the few who treat their animals badly and cruelly, and they must be ousted, regulated and banned from the sport. My hometown of Enniscorthy boasts one of the oldest greyhound tracks in the state. It opened in 1933. So I'm well aware of the majority of owners who take great care of their animals and go to extraordinary lengths to look after the welfare of their animals in that neck of the woods, and how important the industry is to the county, from tourism to local charities who rely on race nights for much needed funding, and the greyhound fraternity as a whole. This year extra funding is being introduced. On that basis, Minister, will the existing percentage of 10% allocated specifically to the animal welfare sector be increased on a pro rata basis? We would like to see this happening immediately. Another important issue is the overall governance of both industries. Considering this is such a large amount of public funding, can the Minister point out the existing checks and balances that are in place and explain what way the money is allocated at present and how it is scrutinised? For example, what is the criteria used to distribute the prize money, and how come the lion's share seems to go to the wealthiest horse owners and trainers and very little down the chain? It is vital we have the kind of oversight we are dealing with public money. We understand a review was called for and committed to last year, and that an outside agency would be appointed to carry out that review. What has happened since? We would like to see this review published in full, and a robust governance and a copper-fast articles of association attached. Can the Minister give a date as to when the review will be ready, or what exact stage it is at presently? We would also support the Labour Party amendment basically calling for the highest standard of animal welfare are implemented, and how best to support these sectors, particularly in rural communities.
Gael and Kelly, please.
I move the amendment, Ceann Comhairle. It's the same amendment as last year, and I hope it will be supported. We've always supported this fund, as you know, Minister. We do so because we know I do so because we know how important traditionally these industries are. But we do need to re-examine the structure of it. The idea that we're just going to leave it roll over every year. I don't know why there's even an individual vote every year. But outside of that, we also need to just look at how it's functioning. And it's kind of just left in limbo every year. Because time has moved on and the whole way in which this was set up has become disintermediated. There's a need to relook at it. I do believe in funding for the industries, but we also need to look at the broader issue. And could we look at the formulas? Could we look at a broader fund which is incorporating all other areas of sport? Do we need to look at whether we need to amend legislation to help this, to segregate it, to measure it as well? Obviously, where I come from in Tipperary, I was born a few fields away from Tiger Roll, one of the most successful horses ever, certainly one of the smallest horses to ever win what they won. And my old employers in Fáilte, Ireland have a thoroughbred marketing strategy which just relates to your county, Minister, and my county, because it is so important to our economies, employing up to 40,000 people. So it's critical that we support the industries, but it's also critical that we look at ways in which this can be moved on and modernised. How it can be targeted, particularly at small, the smaller breeders, smaller players in the industry, particularly when it comes to the horse racing industry. In overall funding of sports, we need to look at how we can incorporate this along with everything else that's going on in sports funding. We had Sport Ireland in front of us in the Public Accounts Committee, and I often think people don't really understand what they do. They're not a regulator. So do we need to look at this in the broader sense of how we fund sports? We've got sports capital, we've got sports funding coming through direct funding from the department, from Sport Ireland, from various other different state organisations, from local authorities, from regional authorities, from a whole range of other sources as well. And how effectively can we look at all of this together so that it is appropriated out fairly and effectively, and ensuring that on the one hand we support sport and active participation, on the other hand we also support these industries which are so critical to rural life, which are so critical to rural living, and which employ so many people. In relation to welfare, and I've said this numerous times, obviously it's paramount. We need more people who are from a welfare background on the board, Minister. I said the same thing this time last year. We need more people from a welfare background on the board. One issue which I am passionate about, to conclude, Ceann Comhairle, is that, you know, there are many people, particularly who are fantastic people who are involved in both industries. But I do have a concern that the passion some young people in particular show in the horse racing industry, in the breeding industry, and in that whole area, that maybe it can be overlooked and they can be taken for granted a bit because they're so passionate about it and they love it so much. But are they being paid fairly? And it's an issue that I have a concern about. So I would urge, Minister, that there is a process put in place to ensure that people, particularly all of these young people who are working across this industry, that they are protected by the Working Time Act, because they do serious hours, and that they are paid a fair wage for the work that they do. And I believe that a registered employment agreement across the sector would be very beneficial, like it would be in many other sectors, but particularly where we have thousands of people working in this industry, where we can grade their work, where we can identify their work, and we can create a certain pay standard for their work, and also adhere to the Working Time Act. I think from the basis of us who support the industry and support horse racing in particular, that would be a very, very good thing to do, and something we should be really looking at into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Kelly. Deputy Cairns.
Good morning, Ceann Comhairle. Greyhound racing has been in decline for decades, but this government has handed the greyhound industry 94 million over its term in office, and they've actually increased funding this year by €4.1 million. And this year, like every other year, I have to ask the question, why? Why is the government so insistent on propping up this industry? Why is it so insistent that the greyhound racing industry is some integral part of our culture when racetracks are virtually empty around the country? Ireland is one of only 7 countries in the world where commercial greyhound racing is still legal in 2024. And in one of those countries, the US, it only remains legal in 5 states. Is it any wonder that it's been banned everywhere else? After RTE revealed in 2019 as many as 6,000 dogs a year were being culled for not being fast enough, the Greyhound Board introduced a deeply flawed traceability system in 2021. Non-coursing greyhounds are only registered on the system at 12 weeks and only if born in the Republic. No dogs born in the North are included. There is no way of knowing the extent of the overbreeding problem if we do not know how many dogs are born in a given year. Thousands of dogs have been bred and then destroyed because they didn't make the cut. Destinations for exports of dogs to any country other than the UK are not recorded on the system, despite the fact that we know Irish greyhounds are still sold to China and Pakistan, both countries with horrendous animal rights records. According to that 2021 data, of the 7,135 greyhounds registered as still being in Ireland, 27% are dead. That is 1,951 dogs. More than 60% of those dogs do not have a listed reason for death. The Committee on Agriculture, Food and the Marines report on dog welfare noted there is virtually no oversight or transparency concerning canine artificial insemination, a process so dangerous for dogs it's banned in the UK. Yet somehow it is still legal here, all to facilitate the rampant overbreeding of greyhounds, which is a hallmark of the industry. Why will this government not acknowledge what the overwhelming majority of the country clearly knows, which is that greyhound racing is a cruel industry which has no place in a modern society? Of course, there are breeders and trainers who love and care for their dogs, but they're operating within an industry with rampant animal welfare abuses, injuries, fatalities, overbreeding, and culls. The public isn't behind it, tracks are emptying, and yet the government continues to keep the industry on life support, throwing millions of taxpayers' money at it every single year. The continued support of political parties in government and opposition for state funding of this cruel industry honestly shocks me every year. The Green Party's stance remains a particular disappointment, having a long-standing position of opposing the practice. The Labour Party have tabled an amendment calling for revising of the funding model, clearly not opposing the principle of propping up the industry with public purse. Sinn Féin last year voted in favour of the funding, and I hope this will not be repeated tomorrow evening. I fully expect that the motion, despite all these glaring, unaddressed issues, will pass, not with the support of the majority of the public, but somehow with the support of the majority of parties in this chamber. One of the things that has just really stood out to me since becoming elected is the power of an organised lobby group. And the greyhound racing industry's lobby just epitomises it. That an industry on the decline gets this level of funding, while other worthwhile causes, like disability services, like eating disorders, domestic violence services, are underfunded year after year after year. They don't have the same kind of organised lobby, and public funding to the greyhound racing industry is constantly met. The importance of the industry to the survival of rural communities is fantasy. If parties in this chamber are so convinced of its importance and its popularity, why not let it survive on a commercial basis? The Minister, the Government, the Labour Party, Sinn Féin and some independent TDs do not want that, because they all know the support is not there and that the industry would simply collapse without the annual handout of taxpayer money. When will they face reality and end state subsidy for this cruelty?
Thank you, Deputy Cairns. Now we go to people before profit, where Deputy Paul Murphy is sharing with Deputy Mick Barry.
3.5 and 1.5.
Not very equal there, no, is it?
Thanks, Cian Corla.
You keep making the same joke.
I know.
It's not a joke.
You get new material for the next stall.
You're great advocates of equality.
You need new
New material. Need to write some new stuff.
Anyway, sorry.
You're right. This is actually the 11th time since I've been elected to the Dáil that I've been asked to agree to giving tens of millions, now almost 100 million euros, to the horse and greyhound racing industry. I added it up, and over the time that I've been in the Dáil, this stall has voted time after time, all in all, to give almost €1 billion to the horse and greyhound racing industry. This year, as every other year, the funding is being increased by €6 million. Coincidentally, €6 million is the same as the total amount of money received by animal welfare organisations this year. €6 million spread across 100 animal welfare organisations. And right there in the figures, you see how Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, the Green Party and the others who will go along with it, how much they value animal welfare compared to the animal cruelty industry that is greyhound racing in particular. Collectively, horse and greyhound racing getting €99.1 million, 79 million of that to the horse racing industry. Almost all of that money ends up tax-free in the pockets of the richest people in this country, and then €20 million to the greyhound industry, keeping this industry of cruelty on life support. The tracking system for greyhounds brought in 2021 reveals that almost 3,000 racing greyhounds born in 2021, a quarter of all the puppies born that year, are already dead. The natural life expectancy of a greyhound is 10 to 15 years, but a quarter of Irish racing greyhounds are dead before they reach their 3rd or 4th birthday. What is happening to those dogs? Last year, the industry itself reported that 133 dogs died literally on the tracks, an average of 11 dogs killed every month. Dogs are routinely doped up with dangerous drugs to make them run faster. Young dogs often drop dead of heart attacks. Every racetrack has a freezer for the carcasses of all the dead dogs. That includes the 9 state-owned greyhound racetracks. State-owned greyhound racetracks. Think about that for a minute. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have eagerly privatised vital public services like childcare, nursing homes, but dead set on hanging on to publicly owned greyhound racing tracks, publicly owned freezers stuffed full of dead dogs. It is so grotesque, it is almost unbelievable. It's not only the animals that suffer from this state-sponsored cruelty. People unfortunate enough to become addicted to gambling are being exploited. They and their families are victims of this state-owned, state-funded industry. In August, the ISPCA called for the closure of the greyhound racing industry and animal welfare grounds. Dogs Trust made a similar call last year. They all want a ban on greyhound racing, as a majority of the public supports, which is closely linked with the barbaric practice of hare coursing. But Minister, not alone will you not ban it, but you're increasing the funding to it, without which this public money, it simply would not survive. In future, people will look back at these practices in the same light as banned barbaric practices like badger baiting and dog fighting. This must be an issue in the general election.
What exactly are the priorities of your government, Minister? What's important to you and what's not? You've got people out on the streets forced to go rattling tins to raise money for domestic violence centres, and you decide to give nearly €20 million to the greyhound industry. Don't you know, Minister, this is a cruel industry. Deputy Murphy said a quarter, my stat says that more than a third of the racing greyhounds born in 2021 and still remaining on the island of Ireland are now either dead or unaccounted for. If Deputy McGrath might have a listen rather than talking over me the way he tried to talk over Deputy Cairns when she was speaking. This industry would not survive if it wasn't for state money propping it up. The stadia are 90% empty. That's in the wake of all the animal cruelty scandals. I leave aside, for reasons of time, your plans to give €80 million to the horse racing industry, with the Shannonside Foods abattoir scandal still fresh in the memory. I'll just conclude by saying that it is outrageous, that you are granting the greyhound industry €20 million, an increased handout over what you gave them last year. Stop animal cruelty. Stop this funding now.
Thank you, Deputy Barry. No. Deputy Lowry is next. Please.
Minister, a negative focus was brought to bear on the horse racing industry earlier this year. Revelations from the abattoir in County Kildare shocked and sickened people in every corner of the country. They portrayed an image of horrendous practices that tainted the sport of horse racing. People were justifiably sickened and disgusted. Ireland is recognised globally as a nation of animal lovers. To see issues of barbaric animal cruelty come to light brought forth a cry of national outrage. This is not a reflection of who Irish people are. This is not what Irish people will tolerate. The issues highlighted in this stomach-churning programme needed to be exposed. No one person I have met or spoken to will contradict that. Screening it created awareness. It also awakened vigilance that will ensure that such practices will not be tolerated in the future. Holding those responsible and ensuring that they face the appropriate penalties is not only expected, it is demanded by both animal welfare groups and the general public. Anything less will not be acceptable. However, to penalise the sports of horse and greyhound racing based on this expose makes little sense. To argue against increased funding support for both horse and greyhound racing is to dispel the role they play in Irish culture. It risks undermining the returns that these sports bring to the economy consistently year after year. Support from the state to the horse and greyhound industry is a significant and important financial outlay in the budget. The money allocated to both industries is an investment. The increased allocation to 99.1 million for the year ahead is being welcomed across both organisations, particularly by Greyhound Racing Ireland. A constructive marketing and promotion campaign has seen attendance figure improving at many tracks during the year. Their revenue intake is steadily increasing, and government funding such as that provided to Kilkenny track will enable them to implement their development projects and achieve the goals they remain committed to. This budget allocation has also fuelled the determination to make provision for retired greyhounds. The average age for a greyhound to retire is 3 to 5 years. These retired dogs, due to their gentle nature, make excellent pets. They are well socialised through their close contact with people and are low maintenance in terms of grooming. At such a young age, they have many years of companionship to offer to dog lovers. The provision of additional funding is necessary to provide a dedicated sanctuary and rescue centre for retired greyhounds. Focusing on a rehoming strategy and a funding model should be a shared responsibility between the greyhound industry and the Department of Agriculture. Private tracks such as Thurles and Clonmel are every bit as important to owners and breeders as the main tracks. Like every sector, they are grappling with increased costs and overhead. GRI Minister should increase the operational grants provided to private tracks. The horse racing industry remains strong and thriving across Tipperary and the country. It continues to build on the stellar reputation that Ireland holds across the world. Few people that are not directly involved in horse racing realise the benefits that this sport delivers to the overall economy in Ireland. The fund of 1.8 billion is the horse racing industry across Ireland generates an average of 1.8 billion in gross expenditure annually. This fund supports more than 10,000 Irish jobs. Thousands more jobs allied to horse racing depend and benefit from the services they provide. Top-level equine vets, farriers, horse transport drivers, stable hands and grooms are among those employed by the industry. In addition, hundreds of people are employed at race meetings where they provide track maintenance, catering, betting facilities and carry out a myriad of other tasks that must be performed to ensure that everything quite literally runs smoothly. Ireland's racing industry is one of our biggest and most consistent tourist attractions. Race lovers flock to Ireland to attend race meetings, resulting in a massive boost in revenue for the transport, hospitality and retail business industries. Ireland also has a very impressive and much envied global horse breeding reputation, which results in the demand to have horses bred here continuing to grow year after year. All combined, Ireland's equine industry provides a yearly revenue input exceeding 900 million to the Irish economy. The annual level of investment in horse racing from the government pales in comparison to the money it returns year on year. Without that investment, our capacity to capitalise on what Ireland has to offer would be seriously diminished. In a nutshell, any decision to reduce financial support to horse and greyhound racing would be unwise and counterproductive to our economy. I welcome the allocation in this year's budget.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lowry. Now, Deputy McGrath, are you sharing with Deputy Healy-Rae?
Good man, good head. First, Kildare Cheese Town Court, I want to declare an interest because I've been raised in a family, in farm, with cattle dogs and sheep dogs. I think you know that yourself, Town Court. And we still have sheep dogs. My son is farming the mountain sheep. You couldn't farm without sheep. And I would like to put a question, she's not here, I know, but you'll carry it back there, I'm sure. Deputy B. Smith comes into this house most days with a dog in the van. hail, rain or snow and hot weather. And I'd love to bring my dog to Dublin, but I couldn't mind them in Dublin. So I wonder, where's the animal cruelty in that? The thoroughbred industry alone has an animal economic impact on approximately 1.9 billion, supporting around 29,000 jobs, directly and indirectly. Government support to the Horse and Greyhound Fund is essential in sustaining these industries. The 2025 fund has been increased and we welcome that. And I also want to make an appeal for more funding for animal shelters and pause in Mullinahone and Tipperary badly need fund. And I abhor from the bottom of my heart any cruelty to dogs or animals of any sort. And 99.9% of farmers look after their animals as good as they look after themselves. And there are some rogues, and they must be stamped out of the horrible practices that we've seen, sometimes with calves and many times with dogs. It shouldn't be allowed. And no one will talk about the cruelty of sulky racing on hard surfaces, doing untold damage to the feet and the knees of little ponies, being pulled, the small young ponies and everything else, and being killed on the road and left on the road. And that's happening. But we can't talk about that taboo topic here. None of the left parties will touch that or mention it. And the amount of hares being killed with 6 and 7 dogs, lurchers and terriers, tearing them apart with no muzzles, and there's no talk of the cruelty there. Ignore that totally. We can't mention that because it's an ethnic minority that do it. We can't even mention it. It's total hypocrisy and scandalous carry on that you're blind to see what's going on. And Deputy Collins, I wish you well in your upcoming event, and anybody, I wish everybody well. But you brought up a lurcher here one time, that's all. You didn't even know what a greyhound was. A lurcher. You had outside protesting. I pointed that out to you at the time. You didn't know the difference. So please come and see the farmers, how they support their animals, and see the greyhound industry. And we're so lucky in Tipperary to have such prowess in racing industry in our county. We have Brian Atchison, we have Coolmore, we have Heydon O'Brien, and many more small people. So they give great enjoyment, but above all, they give jobs and they support our economy.
Thanks very much. I'm glad to get the opportunity to speak in favour of this very important bill, because overall the horse and greyhound industries are integral to the economic and social fabric of rural Ireland. With continued support and strategic improvements, they can continue to provide significant benefits to the economy and social benefits to the economy and communities across the country. Indeed, going back over 40 years ago, Count Corla, I can remember one man that sheep farmed under Mangerton Mountain, but his one big event every year was to get my father's taxi car to take him to the Kildare races. Dan McCann, he's long gone, but that was his main outlet in those times. And since then, the Kildare races are a big event, and they draw big crowds to Kildare at different times of the year, and they're very important. In that regard, people come, stay in hotels, they see the county, they travel around, and we appreciate that. Likewise, Listowel. And then the document, all the people in Browne, where I was last night, and Knocknagoshel, Castle Island, Tralee, Ballyduff, all of North Kerry, Lixnall, all them places. Maybe for a lot of them, hurling would be number one and football in those areas. But the dogs are close behind, and they work. They go out early in the morning to work, but they come home in the evening, and they hardly have their dinner eat when they're out training the dogs, walking the dogs, seeing after them, bedding them, and it's a great social. That's their social outlet, and we must appreciate that, because it is part of our culture. It is part of their culture. And that's what we're representing here always, to value our culture, because this has been going on for decades and decades. People put their heart and souls into the dogs, and the people that I know wouldn't harm any dog. They wouldn't harm the hair in their head. I don't have much hair in my head, but that's them are the kind of people that I'm supporting and want to continue supporting. I thank the Minister. Any euro that he can give in their direction is very important, and money well spent.
Deputy Violet Ann Wynne, please.
to Ceann Corla. Our culture needs to change. This sector receiving huge amounts in the millions without rigorous animal welfare criteria being satisfied or any conditions related to workers' rights in the sector attached to the funding. You know, is it an oversight issue, especially considering that there have been numerous reports of serious animal welfare concerns, and notably in the last 12 months? I mean, I suppose that's the question that the public will be putting to government as we move into election season. But the funding without any of those criteria being met has to stop. So the Horse and Greyhound Fund will now receive 99.1 million in taxpayers' money, which is up 4.1 million. That is a 4.3% increase, up from 95 million last year. How is that increase justifiable, especially considering that a significant amount of the funding is actually used for prizes? I mean, you couldn't make it up. I attended the Simon Community online event that spoke to recent budget announcement and its context, and we heard how we have not managed to increase our core social welfare payments, as just an example, to the same spending power that it once had in 2018, since which the population has increased by 133% and inflation increases by 109%. And an interesting point to note is that the funding has actually been increased by 31.1 million in 9 years, which is absolutely astonishing. There are a number of alternative uses for the money. 303 million has been allocated to homeless services. This Greyhound bill represents 1/3 of the money allocated to emergency accommodation, step-down accommodation and all other homeless services nationwide. We know in County Clare, for example, they are only receiving an additional 300,000, and that is only to stand still in respect of emergency accommodation. We have a number of constituents who cannot access emergency accommodation, so how can we increase capacity? Gurmagat.
Thank you, Deputy Wynne. Minister, please.
Ceann Corla, I'd like to thank all of the deputies for their contributions here on this important topic here today. And maybe to start off, I might answer some of the points that were raised. Deputy Kelly had queried why we're debating this here today, or the mechanism around this. And just to put on the record in summary, further to the earlier statement I made, in order to allow the department to provide the monies allocated in budget 2025, it is necessary to comply with the technical requirement under section 1213. No, and that's why we're here, and that's why we're doing this. But I do want to come back to your broader point, Deputy Kelly, where you reference, I know a number of your colleagues in the Labour Party have raised this previously, that maybe we should take some of that money off that, and there's other sports. That's the point I picked up, and I know some of your colleagues in the Labour Party have said that previously, that take some money for other sports, and it misses a broader point. Government doesn't treat horse racing or greyhound racing as a sport. I'm not a minister in the Department of Sport, I'm a minister in the Department of Agriculture. And for very good reason, the horse racing and greyhound racing industries come under the Department of Agriculture, because they are just that. They're industries that employ thousands of people, the length and breadth of the country, in areas of rural Ireland where there isn't the same amount of other economic activity and job opportunities. And we are, as a government, actively increasing our support for sport. We see the huge success of the Irish team this year at the Olympics. We see the massive investment there has been in the latest round of sports capital grants funding, and the great investment there will be in large-scale sports infrastructure funding. Next Sunday alone, our own Ceann Corla County Grounds in Newbridge or Nowhere will officially finally be open. That has been the recipient of direct support as well from government under the large-scale sports infrastructure fund. So there has been no shortage of support from government for sport, but this is different. This is jobs, this is economic activity, and it is, as has been said by a number of contributors as well, part of our core culture, particularly in rural Ireland, but across the whole country. And government's commitment to these sectors is reflected in the programme for government, Our Shared Future, which seeks to ensure that the horse and greyhound racing industries achieve their maximum potential, and in doing so contribute to the economic and social development of the country. Successive governments have steadfastly supported these industries and the jobs they provide, and they have supported by legislative measures and policy initiatives for a considerable length of time. The horse and greyhound racing industries have a wide geographic spread and contribute to balanced regional economy, across rural Ireland in particular. The welfare of horses and greyhounds is of the utmost importance to both industries, and I am assured that HRI and RCE are striving to ensure the highest standards, with both industries making substantial investment in integrity and welfare initiatives. The Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund Ceann has played a key role in providing this investment, has been influential in influencing the future of these sectors. The Irish economy continues to face many challenges, and coupled with the fact that we are a small and open economy, naturally prone to volatility, it can be somewhat difficult to fully predict what the future holds. It is therefore crucial that we support these important industries in their continued navigation through these challenges as we enter into 2025. The Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund has been pivotal in shaping the development of both the thoroughbred and greyhound racing industries, and I believe that the €99.1 million allocation is vital to help secure jobs and sustain communities, particularly in rural Ireland. The Irish equine breeding and racing industry is extremely competitive at a global level and is a true example of superiority in the field. The future of the greyhound racing industry is dependent on a strong governance platform and on the industry having the highest standards of integrity and welfare founded on a strong regulatory system. The investment directed towards the greyhound sector is vital for upholding a time-honoured tradition and fostering economic development across the country. The particular importance of the funding for this industry to rural Ireland is well recognised. As I stated in my opening address, Section 12(13) of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Act 2001 provides that a draft of these regulations be laid before both houses of the Oireachtas and a resolution approving the draft be passed by each house. Again, I ask you for your support to ensure that Horse Racing Ireland and Rasia Conhéireann receive the funding provided for in Budget 2025. Ceann, I commend this regulation to the House for approval. Thank you very much.
Very much. Thank you, Minister. Now, Deputy Alan Kelly has moved his amendment. So the first question is that the amendment be agreed to. Is the amendment agreed?
Not agreed.
Not agreed. Seachtaí tar héamh tarscan aber is tá. Ina gine, Neil.
Neil.
Solon Gul Kesh Richard. The question is carried.
Vote all.
Vote all. Therefore, the vote is deferred until the voting block tomorrow evening.